This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'll reveal the significance of Joe Biden having a secret phone for the Biden family international bribery operation. I'll also examine the basis of a Merrick Garland impeachment by the House. Author and podcast host Jesse Kelly joins me. We're going to talk about his new book, The Anti-Communist Manifesto. I'll show how the Swedes are rejecting climate hysteria and adopting a nuclear-based energy policy. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
Needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
The latest revelation in the Joe Biden corruption and bribery scandal is that while Joe Biden was vice president, he had a secret phone that he used to make these international deals. Now, let's remember that Joe Biden has denied any knowledge of these deals, any involvement in them. All he says is, I'm proud of my son Hunter. He's the smartest guy I know. But Joe Biden clearly is involved. But how is he involved? Well, it turns out that there is a way to contact him. He does participate, but he can't do it using his house phone, and he can't do it using his office phone, and so he has a secret phone. Now, this is something that was found by the researcher Peter Schweitzer. He was on Maria Bartiromo's show, and he made the observation that Joe Biden's phone is paid for by Hunter Biden's firm. Now, all of this makes complete sense, right? You've got this bribery racket. The bribery racket is, in this case, there's a larger element to it, but in this case being conducted through Hunter Biden and his partners. The money flows into the Hunter Biden companies. It's then transferred to Hunter's own LLC. It then goes to Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is actively involved. But they have to find a way to communicate with him that is not, that doesn't seem to be traceable. And so that's why the secret phone. Now, the private phone line it's an AT&T phone. And I find it very interesting that AT&T seemingly has been hanging on to this information because presumably AT&T knew this. This is also something that with all these investigations underway, supposedly, I say supposedly, an FBI investigation, certainly an IRS investigation, you think AT&T would have provided this phone information, but they didn't. Here's Schweitzer. He says it was a global phone where you could access somebody anywhere around the world. And Peter also says that he shared the phone number and the account information with the people over at the House Oversight Committee. So this is actually very good news because it means that the Oversight Committee will be on top of this. Now, I mentioned yesterday that Hunter Biden had sent a message to a fellow named Henry Zhao, Z-H-A-O, the CEO of Harvest Fund Management. This is a Chinese guy with deep connections in China. So this is the Chinese operation that the Bidens were running. And in the text, which I quoted yesterday, but I'll just paraphrase today, Hunter Biden basically goes, pay up. He goes, you promised, you agreed to pay, you haven't paid, and I'm getting annoyed, and I'm sitting here with my dad, Joe Biden, and listen, if I don't hear from you right away, this guy is going to go into action, and I'm going to also go into action, and we're going to make you pay for not having paid. And guess what? Just days after Hunter threatened this Chinese official with Joe, quote, in the room, $5.1 million moved from China to the Hunter Biden entities. And then, as I also mentioned yesterday, this all occurred. Hunter Biden sent this message to the Chinese guy, Henry Zhao, while at Joe Biden's residence in Delaware. So his claim that Joe Biden was in the room wasn't, it seems, idle boasting, but looks to be an accurate description of the fact that the two of them were together at the time. So this is all escalating in a very interesting way. I think it's now dawning on the House. Debbie was quoting an article to me today where House representatives are now realizing that this is now moving into very plausible impeachment territory, not just for Merrick Garland, not just for Mayorkas. For Joe Biden, this is the way to get him. His border policies are horrible, but it's difficult to get a president on a policy issue. It's much easier to get him on sheer, outright, blatant, brazen corruption. Corruption that, by the way, the media is starting to take an interest in, although they're very protective of Biden. I mean, just imagine if this had been Trump or the Trump family, this would be all over the place. Trump and his family wouldn't be able to move without being screamed at by baying hordes of reporters. So the discrepancy, the kind of glaring difference in coverage between Trump and Biden is not something that should go unnoticed. Now, the House Oversight Committee has been digging into this, and the latest from Representative Comer, we're talking about a network of over 20 companies set up by the Bidens. Quote, most of these companies were limited liability companies formed during Joe Biden's vice presidency. So this is not the case where the Bidens beforehand decided, let's go into business, let's set up some companies. No, they set up the companies for the purpose of the international bribery racket. And the number of Bidens involved is several. Hunter Biden, James Biden, Sarah Biden, Hallie Biden, Kathleen Biden, Melissa Biden. There's a niece or nephew involved, a second niece or nephew involved. There's even a grandchild involved. And the point being, not that all these people are active, but that they are conduits for money to flow. Imagine money is flowing to Hallie Biden. Money is flowing to Kathleen Biden, to nieces and nephews, to grandchildren. That's because Joe can't take the money directly. It's kind of like, listen, don't pay me. Pay that guy over there. Don't make me look bad. Somebody could be recording this. Let's pretend to just be having a conversation. This is the guy who is currently occupying the White House. In view of all the stuff going on, it's time to be careful about your savings. The debt ceiling crisis has come to a head. The Biden administration is doing its best to force more government spending. They've reached a settlement deal. But for now, our national debt continues to skyrocket. Well, how are you protecting your savings? Times like these are when concerned savers like me turn to gold. And I, like thousands of similar-minded people, buy my gold from Birch Gold. Here's the easiest way to do it. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. As the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, band together against the dollar, more and more central banks are diversifying. Well, you know what they're buying? Gold. Follow their lead. Get started by texting Dinesh to 989898 for your free information kit on gold. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. Birch Gold can help protect your savings too. Again, get started by texting Dinesh to 989898 today. Attorney General Merrick Garland says that attempts to question the fairness of the Department of Justice, the Biden DOJ, are attacks on the institution of justice and attacks on the institution of democracy. Now, this is a very bold effort to cover up the cover-up. So the DOJ has been aggressively attempting to block investigations of the Biden family, arrests, searches, prosecutions, indictments. So it's not the Department of Justice, it's really the Department of Injustice. There's a single line that really stands out from the Delaware U.S. attorney. His name is David Weiss. And that line is, quote, "I am not the deciding official." So David Weiss is speaking to a group of FBI agents, IRS officials, and they're all pressing him. Hey, listen, we've got this, we've got that. We need to go search the Hunter Biden premises. We need to file in D.C. And David Weiss goes, I am not the deciding official. I don't have the authority to do it. In fact, according to Weiss, according to what he told these guys, he was being blocked in D.C., not just by Matthew Graves, who was the top official, but also by the DOJ. And he was being blocked all over the place by the Biden DOJ. He, at one point, apparently was interested in getting special counsel status, which would give him independent authority. That seems to have been blocked. So a pattern of interference with David Weiss's project. Now, this runs completely athwart what Merrick Garland told the Congress. Merrick Garland said, we're not interfering with this guy at all. He has all the authority he needs. He can bring all the cases wherever he wants. If he wants to bring indictments, he can bring indictments. But it looks like what really happened is that David Weiss decided, I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do, and so I should settle for what I can get. And so he made this sort of sweetheart deal with Hunter Biden. He probably thought, well, listen, at least I'm getting him to plead guilty to some tax misdemeanors. At least I'm going to have him plead guilty to a gun violation. But the point is that David Weiss seemingly wanted to do a whole lot more and was blocked in doing this. Now, Jonathan Turley, the political scientist, has a column on this, which is called Who is Lying, Merrick Garland or the Whistleblowers? And I think the column is a little bit tongue-in-cheek because it's stated under a rhetoric of neutrality. Basically, Turley goes, listen, there are two possibilities. One, of course, is that Merrick Garland is lying, and he did, in fact, and his people did, in fact, block the investigation and block the indictments. The other possibility is that the whistleblowers are lying. But these are not equal probabilities. Why? Because the whistleblowers have no incentive to lie. In fact, the whistleblowers are putting themselves under considerable risk. There are multiple whistleblowers, at least two. One of them, of course, I've named Gary Shapley, but there's another whistleblower unnamed. And Gary Shapley, in talking about the meeting at which attorney David Weiss said that he wasn't the deciding official and that he wasn't able to bring these indictments, was a meeting at which numerous other people were present. And Gary Shapley has named them all. This guy was present from the FBI, and this guy was present from the FBI, and this guy from the IRS. And all of these people can testify that this is exactly what they were told. And so you have, on the one hand, a group of sort of honest brokers stepping forward. By the way, these are not Republicans. Gary Shapley, to the best of my knowledge, I've seen reports he's a Democrat. This is a guy who is just trying to do his job. And so here they are. You have these guys and their credibility on the one hand, and a lot of by the way, the things that they said and heard, they've memorialized in writing. They've shared communications with each other about it. So all of this is now in front of the House. And on the other hand, you've got a guy, Merrick Garland, who has been an ideologue from day one. Here's a guy, for example, you can just see the double standard of prosecutions. You can see the kind of cruelty and ruthlessness with which they've gone after January 6 defendants, including people who have not committed any violence. They're basically in the Capitol for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. They didn't deface anything or destroy any property either. They shouted a bunch of slogans, and now their free speech is even used against them as if to say, listen, the guy shouted, go, go, go. What further proof do we need that this is a guy that's trying to plant or promote an insurrection? Now, the bombshell message that Hunter Biden sent to Henry Zhao, the Chinese official, it's very interesting, but that has not been denied by Hunter Biden's attorneys. They say it's illegal to release this message. They say the message is not what it seems, but they don't deny that Hunter Biden said it. And so I think the House here needs to recognize that they are dealing with a nest of corruption that is in no way limited to Hunter Biden. This is not even really about Hunter Biden, as I've said repeatedly. It's about Joe Biden. It's about the entire Biden family. Ultimately, it looks to me, this entire family may have to go to prison. And it's also about the cover-up. It's about the people around the Bidens who have been trying to form a kind of protective ring around them. And in doing it, they too join the group of lawbreakers. Bank failures, record inflation, spy balloons, mass layoffs. It's a recipe for disaster if your investments are with a typical financial advisor. But my friend Rebecca Walser is different. You've seen her on the podcast. She's just got a very canny grasp of the global economy, also of the U.S. economy. And she's a wealth strategist, a tax attorney. She has a global MBA from the London School of Economics. Rebecca Walser told her clients to get out of equities back at the end of 2021. She got it right when most advisors got it wrong. And who had to pay the price? Well, you as the consumer. Well, don't let blind loyalty leave you losing money. Call Rebecca Walser's office today to protect your wealth from the market uncertainty. Debbie and I just did a call with Rebecca's team to talk about our investments, and you should too. Go to friendofdinesh.com to book a call with Rebecca Walser's team today. That's friendofdinesh.com to protect your investments and your future. Guys, I'd like to welcome to the podcast author and podcaster Jesse Kelly. He's a veteran, former congressional candidate. He hosts the Jesse Kelly Show on Premiere Network. Also, I'm Right with Jesse Kelly on The First. And we're going to talk about his new book. It's called The Anti-Communist Manifesto. A great title. Jesse, welcome to the podcast. Your first book, The Anti-Communist Manifesto. Interesting title because it sort of posits itself as opposed to the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx's tract going back to the 19th century. Let's talk about this idea of communism, because I hear the phrase socialism on the left, right? You've got the squad and a kind of an identification with socialism, various socialist groups on campuses. Not a whole lot of people in American politics step forward and say, I'm a communist. But you're saying that we are dealing with communism as a real phenomenon today. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose that title and why the word communism?
Sure. Well, for one, I don't consider myself a Republican or a conservative or libertarian or nationalist or any of those things. I'm an anti-communist. And what that means is, and I'll get to who they are in a moment, defeating them is all that matters. It's all that matters. These arguments we have on the right about this issue or that issue, not that they're not important arguments. I'm not saying that. That's like standing in your living room arguing about what color you want to paint the walls while a gang of murderous thugs is kicking down your front door to kill all of you. There's no point in your stupid argument until the communists are stopped first. They have seized every cultural institution. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the proletariat or the means of production or any of those things. Communism is the religion of the malcontent. That's all communism is. That's why it's taken different forms in every country it's ever been. It was the urban poor in the Soviet Union. And China was the rural poor. In Cambodia, it looked different. Here, they totally switched because the workers and the poor, that didn't work. So they found new malcontents here. That's why it's the LGBTQ demon mob. And of course, the feminists and the climate change nutters. They're all just communists. And most of them, if you catch them off camera or making a side remark, they'll admit it. I mean, you have all the Black Lives Matter founders proclaiming that they're Marxists. Time and time again, Antifa will hold up hammer and sickles at their rallies. They're really not that shy about it. Klaus Schwab has a bust of Vladimir Lenin sitting in his office. They're not that shy about what they are. I don't know why people get mad at me for calling them what they are.
Let's talk about this idea of the malcontent. If somebody is upset with, let's just say they grew up in a small town, they're angry with their parents or with their pastor or with the local school, they develop this kind of. Now, traditionally, we've had malcontents, and this is part of human nature, right? You have people who are upset with their lot. There's nothing new about this. Talk about the psychology that takes somebody who's a malcontent and gives them this ready-made ideology, go throw a brick through a restaurant, go try to take over the military. Well, how do you make that transition from I'm upset with life to this is my political way to go?
Well, what it is, it's an outlet for them. They found a religion that is an outlet for their bitterness and their anger. And what all this is elites finding a way to grab more power for themselves. That's all communism really is, because if I'm the malcontent and you're the elite, Dinesh, and I'm mad about this, I'm a feminist and I've been rejected by 8,000 men. I'm 100 pounds overweight and I hate my freaking life. And Dinesh wants power. I am a prime recruit for you. You can come to me and say, you're right, men do suck. And all you have to do is elect me and give me this power. And then I promise I will hurt the people who've hurt you. I will hurt the people who've hurt you if you just give me money and power. And that's all communism really is. You search society to find these malcontents and you use their bitterness to give yourself money and power. The problem is because it's a religion of anger and malcontentness. That's why it's killed and harmed so many people in a relatively short amount of time. It's only been around about 100 years. To kill that many people shows you it really is evil.
When did you think that this kind of communist infiltration really began in American politics? Is it in the last 10 or 20 years, or does it go back much further?
It goes back much further. And actually, in the Anti-Communist Manifesto, I go over all the history of it. It's laden with history as well as action items. But there's all kinds of history where I talk about when it came here, why it came here. It was, of course, brought here originally prior to the Soviet Union. But once the Soviet Union started to take hold, they started pushing it here. But then that kind of died. And then it moved into the American university system and journalism. I go over the history of all of it. They kept trying to get a foothold here, and they kept failing for the longest time, Dinesh, because they couldn't find the right malcontents. Then about the 60s and 70s, they figured out we need to drop all this workers crap and focus on different malcontents. And they did, and they've had great success over the last 50 years.
Let's take a quick pause. When we come back, more with Jesse Kelly, author of the Anti-Communist Manifesto. Debbie and I had a New Year's resolution to lose weight, and thankfully, PhD weight loss came to our rescue. Debbie has already lost 23 pounds, almost on maintenance, and I'm now on maintenance, having lost a total of 27 pounds. The program is based on science and nutrition, no injections, no pills, no long hours in the gym, no severe calorie restriction, just good, sound, scientifically proven nutrition. It's so simple. They make it easy by providing 80% of your food at no additional cost. They tell you when and what to eat. And guess what? You can do this without ever being hungry. The founder, Dr. Ashley Lucas, has her PhD in chronic disease and sports nutrition. She's also a registered dietitian. She helps people lose weight and, most important, maintain that weight loss for life. So if you're ready to do it, to take the step of losing weight like Debbie and I have, call PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Here's the number. 864-644-1900. You can also find them online at myphdweightloss.com. The number again to call, 864-644-1900. It's time. I'm back with author and podcaster Jesse Kelly, author of the Anti-Communist Manifesto. By the way, you can follow him on Twitter at Jesse Kelly, KELLYDC. Jesse, you said something really interesting, which is that for a long time, the sort of communist left looked to find allies among the working class, the proletariat, I guess working through the unions. This was the whole FDR project of the 1930s, 40s, continued with Truman and on through. But in the 60s, you say, they found, you could almost call it a new proletariat, a new group of discontents. Now, are you talking here about using the weapons of racial division, gender division, sexual orientation, the familiar kind of rubric of identity politics? Was that the big discovery of the 1960s?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's exactly what they did. It's all cultural now. I call it communism, but you can call it cultural Marxism, whatever you want. They dropped the whole worker thing, and it wasn't because they felt one way or the other about the workers. Our workers just had a great standard of living, and they knew they did. We didn't have millions and millions of malcontented workers who hated their lives. We didn't have that. But we did have Black people who'd been mistreated in this country, and they were upset about the lack of civil rights and lack of rights. Now, that's a prime target right there. You have a huge group of people who are angry, whether it's justified or not, and they were justifiably angry at the time. They were angry, and they're primed and ready. Like I mentioned feminists earlier, feminists are always mad about something. They're always primed and ready. The climate change nut jobs, that they believe your SUVs burning down the world, just different groups like that. The LGBTQ is probably the most powerful one now because they pretty much run the planet, but they were a prime one too. We just had different groups, and the communists figured out those are our malcontents. Let's drop all this worker crap and focus on the people who are angry. And you see it now, Dinesh, all over the place with the Democrats. Listen to a Democrat's speech today versus a speech from Clinton, even. A Democrat's speech today is nothing but your life sucks and I'll fix it, and your life sucks and I'll fix it, and America sucks for you and I'll fix it. It's their entire religion now. It's what they are.
How do you explain the fact that, when it comes to racial discontent, for example, I agree, going back to slavery, the dark days of segregation and Jim Crow, but the 1940s, 50s, 60s, this is a period of massive progress in these areas. Essentially, the laws are rewritten across the country. Not only are the laws changed, but public attitudes shift dramatically. You see a surge in interracial marriage. And so you would think that the country would heave a sigh of relief, elected a black president. Isn't it odd that at the very time that the country is addressing and overcoming these problems, racial discontent seems to increase, the polarization seems to increase? Why is that?
Well, it's only odd if you view Barack Obama as a black man instead of viewing him as a communist. Barack Obama is a communist. As you well know, he was raised by communists. Frank Marshall Davis, all these guys, his influences in his life, they weren't black influences, whatever the color of their skin, they were communist influences. America sucks, America's evil, and therefore, no, there's no such thing as racial harmony. That's not something that's going to happen. Different cultures are different. There's always going to be tensions, but we had achieved about as close to that as you could come prior to the election of Barack Obama. But Obama gets in there, and the one thing a communist can never have is any kind of harmony at all. People have to be angry. They have to be malcontented. And if they're not malcontented enough, you better get to work and make them that way. And so he did 8 years of racial agitation that has now simply become part of the Democrats. It's part of their party. It's part of their party platform. America's evil, racist, and you're oppressed. Over and over and over again, they preach that now. It's why we have worse racial tension in this country than at any point since, the 60s? That's why it is the way it is. It was done on purpose.
I mean, the other thing, Jesse, that's interesting in the Obama years, and I was puzzled about it at the time, is he was also aggressively pushing the LGBTQ, the gay agenda. Gays in the military, and it was odd because he had sort of been elected under the idea, I think a false idea, that he was sort of a civil rights hero. He showed no interest in any of that. As far as I know, he spent no time, for example, visiting inner cities or doing any of that kind of thing, but rather this LGBTQ agenda, which, as you say, has exploded, really started under Obama, didn't it?
Of course, because he understands what he was doing. Our problem, Dinesh, and obviously you've talked about this, written about this, you've done great stuff on Obama. Obama's really good. That's the problem. He was really, really good at what he did. He was really good at destroying. He's a very sharp, very charismatic person who knew how to work the levers of power. He knew how to fill the government up with a bunch of communist radicals from academia, which of course he did. Most of them are still there. And he understood the benefit of the LGBTQ finger of the communist fist. They're all in the same communist fist. It's just different fingers, and the climate changers to the LGBTQ to otherwise. And they all have different purposes. Like the climate changers would be to destroy the economy, but the LGBTQ one is much different. It's to destroy the American family and destroy the American church. It's the weapon that will bring the FBI to the door of your church. They're going to use hate crime laws and civil rights laws to bring the FBI to the door of your church to arrest your pastor because he won't marry two dudes. That's the point of it. And blow up the American family. Teach a child that he's not a man, he's not a woman, he should cut his penis off, and love is love, and things like that. And soon you have no more nuclear family, and the nuclear family is the ultimate enemy of communism.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more with Jesse Kelly, author of the Anti-Communist Manifesto. Debbie and I own some MyPillow slippers, but we're going to have to get more. We love the MyPillow slippers, and right now MyPillow has a massive closeout sale happening on their all-season slippers. Listeners and viewers continually make the My Slippers the #1 selling MyPillow product. I got a feeling you're going to want to stock up now when you hear this offer. When you use my promo code Dinesh, you get the all-season MyPillow slippers for $25, regularly $149.98. That's over $120 in savings, limited to 10 pairs at checkout. These will sell out, trust me. My slippers have an exclusive 4-layer design you won't find in any other slipper. The patented layers make these slippers ultra comfortable, extremely durable. They help relieve stress on your feet, and you can wear them anytime, anywhere. They also come in a ton of additional sizes and all new colors. Just go to mypillow.com, use promo code Dinesh, grab a pair or a bunch of pairs of the all-season slippers for $25 each, regularly priced $149.98, limited to 10 pairs at checkout. Remember, enter promo code Dinesh or just call 800-876-0227 for this incredible offer. Won't last long, so please order now. I'm back with Jesse Kelly, author of the Anti-Communist Manifesto. You can follow him at Twitter at Jesse Kelly, Kelly, DC. Jesse, you mentioned earlier, and I think this is hard to argue with, that there's been a alarming and massive takeover of major cultural, political institutions, not just the media and the universities, which have traditionally tilted left, but even institutions that we thought of as more right-leaning, more conservative, the Boy Scouts, the FBI, the military. Now, my question is this. How do we fight this? Do we fight this at the level of the ordinary citizen, like this is what you can do? Or do we really need a counter mobilization that itself involves elites, but elites on our side? So in other words, I'm talking about rival cultural institutions, rival political institutions. What do we do to take on the siege that is going on?
Well, the answer to that question is yes. To be honest with you, we need both. We are going to need elites of some kind on our side. There's never going to be a successful revolution, peaceful and legal revolution, without elites on our side. Remember, the founders of this country, the revolutionaries, they were almost all elites, society's elites. You have to have society's elites. However, we have to consider ourselves as counterculture now. We are no longer the culture. Your religion is no longer America's religion. We are no longer in charge. They have seized every institution. We are now the revolutionaries. So we have to conduct ourselves as revolutionaries. Again, legal and peaceful revolutionaries, meaning we have to seize our cities first, our school boards, our city councils, our county board of supervisors, our sheriff's races. We are in love on the right with saviors. We have this horrible savior complex where I just want this guy to get elected president so he can fix everything, or that guy going to get elected president. That's not going to do anything at all. Seize your area, seize your city, seize your state. Put in aggressive anti-communist policies locally, and then that will eventually, Lord willing, expand nationally. This country will not and cannot be saved from Washington, D.C. We will either take ownership and show up and run for school board, or we will lose.
I sometimes speak at events, women's Republican events and so on. And then some of these women are like, I'm trying, but I'm really tired. And it's because I'm a mom and I've got 4 kids. Now, the left seems to deal with this problem by paying people. And by that, I mean, you've got groups like the Soros-funded groups. And what they do is they have all these professional activists. The people, for example, who are involved in changing election laws are all paid. We don't have any kind of infrastructure that I can see on our side that is equivalent to this. I can say to someone, hey, listen, if you're willing to do 30 hours a week, we're willing to pay you because after all, your time isn't free either. So is it the case that we need to think about creating a rival infrastructure for this? Because otherwise, simply telling people that you need to do more when they already have busy lives may be a kind of a hard call to make.
Oh, you're right. And you're 100% right. We have no infrastructure in place for funding on the right. We don't have institutions. So part of what we have to do, as ugly and uncomfortable as this may be, is create alternate institutions. Now, we're beginning to do this at a lower level, very, very low level. I'm going to start this company because this company made me mad. But we need an entirely separate economy from these people with an entirely separate support structure. There's no money out there, no matter how many rich people we have, for these activists on the ground who will go out and bust their butt and register voters and do these critical things. We just expect them all to be volunteers. The communists would never do that. They throw money all over the place, and we do not. We don't fund our entertainers. We've dismissed this. Books, movies, as you well know, things like that. We dismiss these things as being not important or no one cares. These things are critically important. Seizing the entertainment pillar of our culture from Hollywood to sports is one of the communists' greatest victories. And we dismiss it because it's not dollars and cents. we have to get behind these things monetarily for sure.
I mean, years ago when I went to the one of these Coke, fundraising things, they had tons of wealthy people there. And I was astonished at the amount of money that was raised, but all the money is handed over to the Koch brothers. And so basically the idea is you spend it wisely to fight for our principles. Similarly in politics, people go, Karl Rove, here's $400 million. Go win the election for us. So there's a tendency here. I don't know if it's just laziness on the part of the donor class, but rather than look to see who's actually making a difference, they seem perfectly willing to deposit large amounts of money where it is least effectively used.
Well, we want to put in a little bit of time, Dinesh, is the problem. What we have is a commitment issue. We want to put in a little time, but not too much time. I've got other things to do. The communist doesn't have other things because it's his religion. So if you get some, Johnny Warbucks rich guy on the Republican side, yeah, he wants to save his country and he wants a better country for his kids. But I mean, he's not going to run for office. That sounds like a whole lot of work. So I'll show up at a Koch brothers event and I'll stroke him a $50,000 check and I did my good and I fought for my country. But that doesn't work when they have shock troops willing to work 24 hours a day. That doesn't mean we have to match their commitment time-wise, but we all have to do more, all of us, myself included. I'm not pointing fingers. We all need to do more and do more locally and stop banking on a savior because there's no savior coming. Trump will save us. DeSantis will save us. None of those guys are going to save us. Stop. You will save your community and your neighborhood and yourself first, or there is no saving you.
Guys, the book is called The Anti-Communist Manifesto. My guest has been Jesse Kelly. Follow him on Twitter at Jesse Kelly DC. Jesse, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Dinesh, I appreciate you, sir.
If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your solution. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago. The difference we've seen in our joints, nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. Now, how does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor love it. They order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a real game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. You'll feel the difference. The classified documents case is now before Judge Eileen Cannon, herself a Trump appointee. The left is very nervous about this judge because they feel like she's sort of in the Trump camp. And her first ruling in the case is favorable to Trump. Basically, the government, which is to say the Biden DOJ, tried to get the list of witnesses that are going to testify in this case to be suppressed from being shared with the media and with the public. And the judge goes, well, I don't see any reason this should be the case. I don't see any good justification for why these witnesses need to be kept confidential. So the Justice Department is playing this case very close to its chest. Here's another example of what they're trying to do. They're trying to basically say that the classified information that they're going to be discussing is so top secret, it involves national defense and so on, that this classified information should not be available for anyone to review, perhaps not even Trump himself. Now, let's think about this. Here's Trump. He's a defendant in the classical documents case. And imagine if the government can prevail in being able to convince the judge. I don't think they're going to prevail in doing this, but the very idea that they're trying, I'm now quoting from the government document, they generally require clear defense counsel, this is defense counsel that have been cleared to view this material, to sign a memorandum of understanding, agree to review or discuss classified evidence only in a sensitive compartmentalized information facility or SCIF, and refrain from discussing the classified information with anyone not included in the order, sometimes including the defendants themselves. And they say defendants because it's Trump and also his aide, Walter Nauta. So to me, this is downright preposterous. We're going to see a lot more of this kind of thing. And meanwhile, while the government puts on this massive pretense about the sensitivity of classified documents, they have no problem leaking to CNN. So here's CNN, Caitlin Collins. She releases a clip of a Trump audio that supposedly in this audio, Trump says, "See, as president, I could have declassified this piece of information and now I can't. But this is still a secret." And a staffer responds by saying, "Now we have a problem." Now, what I find interesting is that if this is so top secret, why is it on CNN? Obviously, it's not secret. Obviously, there's nothing here that's all that, hush hush. And so this is a little bit of a game that the DOJ is playing. This is top secret, but guess what? Caitlin Collins has it, and she's playing it on CNN where we can all listen to it. So my reasoning from this is it was supposed to be top secret, but if it can be played on CNN and if the DOJ is leaking it to CNN, guess what? It's not top secret. Let's take it off the top secret register. So this is a case that relies ultimately on legalese. And legalese is a way of saying, let's find a law, not the Presidential Records Act, by the way. The Presidential Records Act has no criminal penalties. And so I think the Biden DOJ realized we can't use that one. And so they decided, let's see what we can use. And they found something that was actually passed during World War I, and it's called the Espionage Act. Now, there's a little bit of history that you need to know about the Espionage Act. And Vivek Ramaswamy had an excellent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal talking about the history of the Espionage Act. Basically, this is what happened. In World War I, a war, by the way, that is more accurately described as a European civil war, because the World War I was not a world war. India was not involved. China was not involved. Most countries were really not involved. But this was a fight between a number of European countries, with Britain and France on the one side and the Kaiser, Germany, on the other. And the United States got into the war for reasons that are sort of unclear. Now, Woodrow Wilson idiotically said this was a war for democracy. It actually wasn't. But nevertheless, if you protested or objected to the war in the United States, a whole series of repressive measures were enacted, including the Espionage Act, to go after domestic dissidents. So this is a horrible law. It was actually passed to quash political dissent in World War I. It criminalized not just spying for enemies, but any, quote, disloyalty among military ranks, and prosecutors used it aggressively to imprison hundreds, if not thousands, of anti-war activists and political dissenters. Now, this act is now being kind of dusted off and selectively used against Trump. You could have used it against all kinds of other people, but no, they're dusting it off, and they're basically saying, look, we can find some violations of the language here, and we're going to use it for something it was never intended to be used, by the way, against the President of the United States. This case is alarming on a whole series of levels, but what it boils down to is that Trump is accused of being careless with these documents. If he was, he wouldn't be the only one or the first president to do this. It may be that we need tighter procedures for the future for how classified information is handled. But part of the problem here is also the fact that there's overclassification. You send me an email, classify it. I reply to your email, classify it. Well, what's in the email that bears on national security? Nothing. So by classifying thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of documents, you now have an opportunity that if any of these documents goes awry, well, you have a case to go after that guy, including the former president of the United States. There seems to be a reassessment of climate hysteria going on in Europe and, in fact, all over the world. Now, countries like India and China have never bought into this climate nonsense. In fact, those are countries that have a clear understanding that they need to grow, and growth requires energy. And energy comes from multiple sources, but fossil fuels, nuclear energy, these are all part of the mix that these countries need as their energy demands grow, certainly algebraically, geometrically, perhaps even exponentially. Now, Europe, on the other hand, sort of bought into the climate change movement. We know, of course, about Greta Thunberg. A number of European countries signed on to the so-called net zero by 2045 pledge. And now these countries are starting to find ways to hesitate, to falter, perhaps even to back out. And the most dramatic example is Sweden. Now, 40 years ago, Sweden decided, this was in the wake of some nuclear scares, Chernobyl, the 3 Mile Island scare in America, and Sweden decided no more nuclear power. That's it. Nuclear power is too dangerous. But now, 4 decades later, Sweden has decided we're going to be building more nuclear reactors, and Parliament has formally abandoned the 100% renewable energy target to meet the net zero by 2045. So part of this happened because Sweden had an election and a more right-leaning government has come in. And this is a government that campaigned on the idea that they were not going to submit to climate fanaticism and they were going to consider nuclear power. So they're just living up to a campaign promise. Here's the finance minister, Elisabeth Svantesson. We need more energy production. We need clean electricity and we need a stable energy system. The point is that the Swedes have said, look, we're not against wind, we're not against solar, but those are unreliable sources of stable energy. And so what they're basically doing is they're saying to the other Nordic countries and also to Germany, which pioneered the whole idea of using renewable energy, we don't think this is going to work for us and we're going to move away and you might want to consider doing the same. There's a very interesting quote that says by one of the Swedish ministers, quote, living close to Russia focuses the mind. I think what they mean by that is that the Europeans for a while were sort of considering just basically getting their energy from Russia, their neighbor to the north. But now that you got the Ukraine war going on, now you've got all these sanctions against Russia, suddenly what was previously something that you could rely on has turned out to be questionable. And so what you have is this move to nuclear energy. Now, in my view, nuclear energy is important, but also important is natural gas. And here in the United States, we have giant quantities of natural gas. For a long time, the United States was not energy independent. Why? Because we relied heavily on importing energy from the Middle East. And that, of course, created a whole host of problems, political problems, as well as the demand for the United States to constantly monitor and get involved in all kinds of bizarre and labyrinthine internecine conflicts within the Middle East. Well, it's what's really going on between the Shia and the Sunni. And right now, when you have energy independence, it's a little bit of who cares. Yeah, we have allies in the region, including Israel, so it's not that we have no interests over there, but our biggest interest was that we needed foreign oil. The point for the United States now is that we are very much in the position of these European countries that have turned ideologically against fossil fuels and ideologically against nuclear. So we have nuclear plants. We've had nuclear plants for a long time. But again, the United States kind of made this pivot away from nuclear. We haven't built any new nuclear plants. And yet this is a source of huge amounts of energy, and it can bring energy costs, well, close to zero. Think about a world in which the world basically could create energy the way that we have air. We don't need to pay for air. You don't need to process it. It's there for the taking. And as a result, we can all breathe comfortably pretty much wherever we are, unless you're like in high altitudes where the atmosphere is very thin and so on. Similarly, energy has always been a scarce product, and therefore the growth of the world has been stymied by the fact that there's only so much energy to go around. We can only tap so much energy, and some people thought the earth only has so much energy now. That idea has fallen by the wayside, but the idea of energy without limits is really, I think, a very powerful idea for the 21st century. it is achievable, and what's keeping us from going in that direction is our own inhibitions, our own foolish ideas, our own submission, not even really to climate data, but to climate models. And climate models are prefabricated. It's garbage in, garbage out. The model is going to tell you what it'll come to a conclusion based upon the inputs that you put into it. And so in that sense, the whole climate science industry, I think, is questionable in the predictions that it makes. Of course, its record of results and predictions is terrible. Fortunately, I think the Swedes are showing a better way for Europe to follow and us to follow also.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.